The unexpected reunion takes place in a cozy café, where the aroma of fresh coffee fills the air. It is a common place for casual encounters, but for them, it becomes the stage for an emotional confrontation. Both were living their lives separately, without knowing that fate would bring them back together. The protagonist enters with firm steps, carrying the weight of months of silence and pain. She is there for a work meeting, with no expectations of reliving ghosts from the past. But as soon as her eyes land on the man she once loved, something inside her trembles. He is there, casually sitting, as if he were just another customer, but for her, it is as if the ground has disappeared for an instant. He also sees her. Behind his controlled expression, there is a shock that he tries to hide. The time they spent apart did not erase the scars, and now, sitting face to face, these wounds begin to throb again. The coffee between them becomes a symbol of everything that is bitter, of everything that was left unanswered. She is not prepared for this reunion. Her hands are shaking, but she forces herself to maintain her composure. She did not want this, not today, not now. His presence confuses her, and the tension grows in the air. The silence that settles between them seems to scream louder than any words they could say. He, in turn, tries to remain calm. He does not admit it, but he feels the impact of her presence. Inside, he is mulling over all the conversations they never had, all the words left unsaid. Why is she here? That is what he asks himself, without knowing that she is as surprised as he is. Something in her gaze accuses her of having come for him, and it bothers him deeply. He did not want it to be like this, but he cannot deny the whirlwind of emotions he feels when he sees her again. She looks at him firmly, but there is a war going on inside. And it is then that he speaks, his voice hoarse, with a hint of bitterness. You came for me, didn't you? The tension explodes. She denies it, of course, but his words hit home. He doesn't believe her, and that angers her even more. I'm not here for you, she replies, with a coldness that masks the storm in her chest. She had no idea he would be here. And if she had known, she wouldn't have walked through that door. But now he's here, and there's no escape. He leans forward, his voice thick with defiance. Admit it. You came to me. You're here because you missed me. His insistence infuriates her. How can he be so arrogant? How can he believe she wants him back? She rolls her eyes, trying to ignore how much his words affect her. If I had known you were here, I would never have come. Their quick exchange is filled with resentment, but at the same time, there's something deeper going on. They're both hurt, and the pain is visible in their eyes. Pride keeps them from admitting any vulnerability. She tries to keep control, but her breathing quickens with each sentence. Her heart beats faster, as if her own anger is pushing her out of the room. He, on the other hand, seems to enjoy this battle. Her words hurt him, but he doesn't show it. On the contrary, he seems to find a strange satisfaction in seeing her angry. He knows he's getting to her. And that comforts him, in a way. At least he's not indifferent. But behind his provocative attitude, there's a pain he tries to stifle. Months of separation haven't been easy, and now, facing her, he realizes how much he's been waiting for this moment, even if unconsciously. She tries to end the conversation. I've seen what I needed to, now I'm going to leave, she says, standing up hurriedly. But he grabs her arm, not tightly, but enough to make her stop. Why do you always do this? He asks, his eyes locked on hers. Why do you always run away when things get tough? His question hits her like a wave. She stares at him, and for a moment, words fail her. There's so much history between them, so many conversations they've never had. He lets go of her, and she takes a step back, trying to catch her breath. It's as if the cafe around them disappears, leaving just the two of them in a bubble of tension and unresolved emotions. She takes a deep breath, tries to regain control, but inside she feels on the verge of collapse. They're both hurt, and yet there's still something that keeps them connected. Something they pretend doesn't exist, but it's there, stronger than ever. The wounds of the past still bleed, and the only thing left is to decide whether to let them heal or continue living with the weight of what was never said. The confusion of feelings only intensifies. After the exchange of words in the cafe, she finds herself alone with her thoughts. As she leaves the place, everything that happened begins to replay in her mind. She tries to convince herself that all of that no longer affects her, that her feelings for him are just echoes of a distant past. But as she walks through the streets, with each step, the weight of those emotions returns with full force. There is a lump in her throat that she tries to swallow, but it refuses to go away. She knew that crossing paths with him one day would be inevitable, but she never imagined it would be like this. Everything seems to have spiraled out of control. She keeps thinking about his accusation, "You came for me." These questions torment her, and she tries to push them away, but they persist. The memories of the two of them together come like a whirlwind. The happy times they had seemed to overlap with what he has become, or what she has become. Who are they now? Two strangers who desperately try to deny what they once meant to each other. Meanwhile, he is also trapped in his own cycle of thoughts. Although he showed coldness and arrogance when he confronted her, the truth is that her presence completely destabilized him. He did not expect to see her again, much less in this way, so distant and defensive. The idea that she did not seek him out on purpose makes him uneasy. There is something he cannot explain, something that prevents him from simply letting her go. He tries to convince himself that he is better off without her, that his life has moved on, but every time he closes his eyes, the image of her in the cafe comes back to him, like a mark he can't erase. He remembers how it was before, how she made him feel alive, how her presence brought light to the darkest days. Now, sitting alone in the same place where he saw her for the first time in months, he wonders how everything got so complicated. There is a void in his chest, a silence that no other person has been able to fill. But he is too proud to admit it. Too proud to give in and accept that perhaps he has made irreversible mistakes. The tension between them intensifies even more. They meet again, by chance near his house, and the conversation that follows is even more charged with hurt and resentment. She accuses him of being cold and distant, and he, in turn, accuses her of never having tried to understand his side. The words cut deep, touching parts of them that are still fragile, even after so much time. She feels helpless. As much as she wants to solve everything, every time she opens her mouth, it seems that she only makes the situation worse. "Why didn't you ever listen to me?" she asks, her voice almost breaking. There's an old pain in her question, a pain she's never been able to process. Instead of calming her down, he responds with even more coldness. "I tried, but you never said anything worth listening to," he says, his voice thick with irony. His words hurt her more than he realizes. She didn't expect him to be so cruel, even now, after everything they've been through. But deep down, she knows he's hurt too. And maybe he's just trying to protect himself from the one person who can really hurt him. They stare at each other for a long moment, and the silence between them is almost unbearable. It's as if they're trapped in a dance, where each movement leads to more pain, more resentment. She doesn't know how to get out of this spiral. He doesn't know how to break the cycle of accusations. But at the same time, neither of them can walk away. So she tries one last time. "I didn't come here for you," she repeats, almost in a whisper, trying to believe her own words. "I came here to sort out my own life." But as the words leave her mouth, she realizes that perhaps she's trying to convince herself of something that isn't entirely true. After all, if her life really was sorted out, why would these conversations with him still affect her so much? Why would being in his presence still make her so vulnerable? He hears the hesitation in her voice, but says nothing. Instead, he watches her silently, sensing that there's something more behind her words, something she's not ready to admit yet. Maybe he's waiting for that. Maybe he's waiting for her to finally give in and tell him what's really in her heart. But at the same time, he knows that asking her to do that would be exposing himself too, and that's something he's not willing to do. At least, not right now. The confrontation ends without resolution. They're both exhausted, emotionally drained, but the pain is still there, like an open wound. The wounds of the past come to the surface with overwhelming force. The reunion between the two turns into an exchange of barbs and accusations, revealing how much they are still attached to the resentments that have separated them. She cannot help the anger that grows inside her at his cold words, and he, in turn, seems incapable of expressing anything other than contempt. "I have nothing to talk to you about," she snaps, her voice thick with hurt. He, however, does not let himself be shaken. "Good, because I'm not interested either," he replies with the same coldness. With each word, the gap between them seems to widen, but at the same time, there is an intensity in their exchanges that reveals that their story is far from over. He mentions, almost casually, that he regrets having married her. His words are like a sharp knife, cutting deep into her heart. She feels the impact, as if her entire world collapses at the sight of that simple phrase. "Do you regret it?" she asks, her voice breaking. She did not expect to hear him say that, and for a brief moment, the vulnerability in his eyes is evident. He, on the other hand, doesn't let any emotion show, hiding behind a mask of indifference. "Yes," he answers without hesitation. "I realized it was a mistake when you left." These words resonate with a coldness that he himself didn't expect. He knows he's being cruel, but deep down, he feels he needs to hurt her, perhaps to justify the pain he's harboring. Perhaps it's a way of protecting himself, of maintaining the safe distance he's imposed between them. She tries to hold her ground, but tears threaten to fall. "I tried," she murmurs, almost as if she's speaking to herself. "I tried to tell you how I felt, but you never listened to me." He shakes his head impatiently. "No, you never tried hard enough," he retorts, mercilessly. "If you had tried, we wouldn't have gotten to this point." The atmosphere grows denser and denser. The weight of the unspoken words, of the suffocated feelings, hangs between them like a storm about to break. They are both on the verge of collapse, but neither of them is willing to give in. Pride and the fear of getting hurt again keep them locked in this game of pain and resentment. The tension between them reaches its peak. He continues to tease her, insinuating that she had fun during the 2 months they were apart. "You must have really enjoyed my absence, huh?" he says, his voice full of bitterness. "I imagine you had fun with other guys, while I was waiting." She can no longer hold back the pain she feels. Tears finally stream down her face, but she quickly wipes them away, determined not to appear weak in front of him. "What did you expect me to do?" she cries, her voice choked with emotion. "That I would spend 2 months crying over you, looking at our old photos and wishing everything could go back to the way it was before?" He remains impassive, but something inside him stirs. He tries to hide the fact that her words are affecting him, that seeing her like this, so vulnerable, is breaking his barriers he has built over time. "I didn't expect anything from you," he replies, his voice low, almost emotionless. "I just wanted you to be honest with me. To stop pretending you don't care." She takes a step toward him, her hands shaking with anger and frustration. "Honest?" she repeats, her voice full of disbelief. "You talk about honesty, but you're the one who disappeared for 2 months without saying a word. You're the one who left me alone, trying to figure out what the hell happened to our marriage." He has no answer for that. The truth is, he knows she's right, that he was responsible for the separation, but admitting it is something he is not ready to do. So instead of answering, he just looks away, unable to look at her at that moment. She feels like something inside her is crumbling. As much as she tries to maintain a strong facade, the truth is that all she wanted was for him to admit his mistakes, for him to tell her that he missed her, that he still loves her. but the words she so desperately wants to hear never come. Instead, he continues to maintain his emotional distance, keeping himself closed in his own world of pain and hurt. Her frustration only grows. She tries once again to reach out to the man who was once her husband, who once made her feel loved and safe. "Why didn't you ever talk to me?" she asks, her voice softer now, almost a whisper. "Why did you just leave?" He finally looks her in the eyes, but his expression is unreadable. "I don't know," he admits, his voice thick with a sadness that he tries, in vain, to hide. "I don't know why I did what I did. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was selfishness. But now it's too late, isn't it?" His words echo in the silence between them, leaving a void that they both feel deeply. She doesn't know what to say, and neither does he. They are stuck in this cycle of pain and regret, unable to find a way back to each other. All that remains now is the growing distance between them, a chasm that, with every word spoken, seems impossible to cross. The situation reaches a critical point. After all the exchange of accusations and the undeniable tension between them, there is an even bigger problem. Oik's car breaks down, as if reflecting the emotional state they are both in. She is visibly frustrated, and he, as much as he tries to maintain a facade of indifference, cannot hide the fact that the situation also bothers him. Oik takes one last look at the car, and her expression fills with contained anger. "Of course this would happen to me," she murmurs, almost as if the world were against her at that moment. The weight of the last few hours, of the difficult conversations, of the unresolved feelings. All of this seems to materialize in that mechanical problem. She is on the verge of exploding, but she holds her ground, fighting not to lose control completely. Meanwhile, he watches from a distance, his arms crossed, with an expression that mixes exasperation and helplessness. "It must be fate," he says, with bitter irony. The comment does nothing to ease the tension, but he can't help himself. It's the only way he can find to deal with the discomfort he feels being so close to her. She turns to him, her gaze full of frustration. "Do you think this is funny? You know, what I really need right now is your help, not your jokes," she replies, her voice shaking with anger. Each word she says is loaded with accumulated resentment, and he feels the impact of each one. He sighs, as if he's tired of the whole situation. "I know it's not funny," he admits, his voice softer now, almost defeated. "But what do you want me to do? I can't fix the car." There's a hint of vulnerability in his voice, something he rarely shows. She shakes her head, clearly disappointed. "It's always like that with you. When things go wrong, you just throw up your hands and give up. You never really try to fix anything," she says, and this time, her voice is not just angry, but also hurt. The hurt of someone who expected more, much more. This statement seems to hit him hard, although he tries to hide how much the truth hurts. "It's not that simple," he retorts, with a certain bitterness. "I tried, for a long time, I tried. But you never wanted to listen." Their conversation seems to go around in circles, always coming back to the same points: hurt, misunderstanding, frustrated attempts to communicate. The broken car is just another symbol of their relationship, something that is completely out of control and that neither of them seems capable of fixing. Then, finally, practical reality sets in. They have to solve the car problem, there is no other choice. He makes a quick call to the local mechanic and informs him that he will have to wait until the next morning for the car to be taken in for repairs. The news hits Oik with the force of a blow. The idea of spending more time in that place, so close to someone who still touches her emotions so much, seems unbearable. "So I'm going to have to stay here?" she asks, her voice thick with discouragement. "Isn't there another way?" she adds, almost as if begging for an alternative solution. "Unfortunately, no," he replies, unable to offer a different solution. "The hotels are all full, and the motels too. The only option is to stay here until tomorrow." Oik bites her lip, nervous. The last thing she wants is to spend the night in that place, reliving all the memories, good and bad, that environment brings. But, at the same time, she knows she has no choice. Fate, in some cruel way, seems determined to keep them trapped in that same space for a few more hours. The inevitable decision to spend the night there creates an almost palpable discomfort between them. Oik is clearly disconcerted by the situation, while he tries to maintain a calm demeanor, although he is also struggling with his own feelings. She looks around, searching for any alternative, but there is nowhere to run. "So, I really will have to stay here," she murmurs to herself, almost resigned. He listens and, for a brief moment, feels a touch of compassion. "We can prepare a room for you," he offers, in a tone of voice that, despite her attempt at neutrality, carries a slight concern. Oik hesitates, as if each decision she makes is loaded with an emotional weight much greater than the simple fact of where she will sleep. "I don't want to bother you," she says, almost automatically, trying to maintain a certain distance, both physically and emotionally. But the truth is that she knows there is no other option. He stares at her for a moment, his eyes reflecting a mix of emotions that he tries to hide. "It's not a bother," he answers, a little softer now. "Let's all have dinner together, and then you can rest." His invitation to dinner makes her stomach churn. Sitting at the table with him, in a forced attempt at normality, seems impossible at that moment. She is not sure if she would be able to bear the closeness, the silence full of unsaid things that would surely follow. "I prefer not to," she says, trying to sound firm, but her voice cracks slightly. He nods, respecting her decision, but he cannot help but feel that something has been lost between them, something that may never be recovered. Dinner is no longer a simple meal, but rather another symbol of the distance that now defines their relationship. As the night draws closer, the weight of the situation increases. They both know they will have to face a few more hours together, confined in the same space, forced to deal with the echoes of what once was and what can never be again. Uncertainty hangs in the air, and what once seemed like a simple matter of fixing a car now turns into something much deeper, much more painful. The atmosphere is charged with unresolved tensions and latent feelings as Oik and he face each other. The discussion about their future seems inevitable, and the fact that they will have to spend more time together only makes the situation worse. Oik tries to distance himself emotionally, but it is impossible to ignore his constant presence. She huddles in a corner of the lobby, her thoughts swirling around their conversation earlier. Their separation has left deep scars, and every unspoken word seems to echo in her mind. The pain of rejection is still sharp, and she can't help but wonder if things could have been different if he had acted differently. He, on the other hand, watches her expression with a look that is a mix of regret and frustration. The weight of his words and past decisions seems overwhelming. Feeling her presence close to him, yet so distant at the same time, is almost unbearable. He wants to fix things, but he doesn't know how to start or if there is anything left to fix. The idea of having to stay here, close, without being able to truly reconnect, is painful. The tension between them is palpable, and the usually neutral atmosphere of the lobby now feels like an emotional battleground. Oik tries to distract himself by looking at his phone, as if the messages and updates could offer some kind of escape from the situation. Instead, the device only reminds her how alone she feels, even when she's surrounded by people who once mattered to her. He leans in closer, trying to break the ice, but every word sounds forced and fraught with insecurity. "If you need anything, let me know," he says, trying to sound casual, but the sincerity of his offer is evident. Oik looks up, her gaze tired and full of doubt. "Thank you," she says, but her answer is short and cold, fraught with a sadness she can't hide. The conversation that follows is brief and awkward. They talk about trivialities, trying to avoid the deeper, more painful topics. The feeling of just passing the time is overwhelming, and they both know that nothing has really changed, except the reality of being stuck together for a while longer. Oik and he prepare for the night, a time of introspection and inevitable frustration. She wonders about the future and the meaning of her choices. In a moment of vulnerability, she shares with him a little of her pain. "I always thought we'd be together forever," she admits, her voice cracking with emotion. "But now, all that's left is the echo of what was. And I don't know how to deal with it." He listens to her, his heart heavy with the sadness he feels himself. "I thought everything would be different too," he says, his voice low and full of regret. "If I could go back and do things differently, I would. But right now, we just have to deal with what is." The silence that follows is filled with a muted wail, both of them trying to process the pain and frustration they feel. Oik stands and walks away, seeking some breathing space. She feels like the separation is inevitable, but the fear of the unknown and the pain of letting go of the past are overwhelming. As he watches her walk away, he wonders if they will ever find a new path, or if they will be doomed to live with pain and regret. The feeling of helplessness is overwhelming, and he cannot see a clear path to reconciliation or peace. Time passes slowly, and the night seems endless. They both find themselves in a state of deep reflection, trying to understand where it all went wrong and what the future holds. Hope seems distant, and the pain of separation is a constant. The feeling of being adrift, without a clear direction, is almost unbearable. The night passes, but the weight of emotions and unspoken words remains, leaving them both in a state of uncertainty and anguish. The atmosphere is dense as Oik and he face a new layer of complexity in their relationship. Their farewell conversation is a mix of frustration and despair, marked by a raw sincerity that leaves no room for illusions. Oik looks at him, her face a mix of sadness and resignation. "I don't know what to say," she says, her voice cracking. "You always had a way of distancing yourself when things got tough, and now it's like we're back to square one." Each of her words is a sharp knife, cutting to the core of the feelings they've both been trying to avoid. He feels the weight of her accusations, the regret for not having been the partner she needed. The discomfort is palpable, and the sense that something essential is falling apart is overwhelming. "I didn't want things to end like this," he admits, trying to make her see the sincerity in his eyes. "If I could go back, I would do everything differently. But I can't, and it kills me inside." Oik closes her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. "You've never been good with words," she says, almost whispering. "It's always been easier for you to say what you think I want to hear than to actually face the truth." The silence that follows is oppressive, both of them absorbing the gravity of the words exchanged. The impending separation seems inevitable, but the sense of loss is overwhelming. Oik watches him with a look that mixes despair and understanding. "I know you're struggling with this," she says, her voice shaking. "And so am I. But the truth is, sometimes the best thing we can do is step away and try to figure out what we really want." He nods, accepting the harshness of the words. "I just hope that somehow we can find a way to heal, to move on, even if it means going our separate ways." The path ahead is murky, and the separation is a painful reminder of the complexities of their relationship. They are both struggling to cope with the pain and uncertainty, trying to find a way to move forward even as the reality of their separation sets in with all its cruelty. The atmosphere is charged with a sense of accomplishment and, at the same time, a sense of impending loss. Oik and he find themselves in a moment of deep introspection, and their conversations about their future plans and possible alternatives for moving forward reveal a raw vulnerability. As he surveys his surroundings, his mind wanders to the memories of the times he shared with Oik. "I never thought things would come to this," he says, his voice thick with a mix of regret and resignation. "All I wanted was for things to be different, but now I'm here, facing the fact that everything is falling apart." Oik watches him with a mixture of sadness and understanding. "I know you're trying to understand what happened," she replies, her eyes filled with a painful feeling. "But sometimes, no matter how hard we try, we just can't change what's already been done." The conversation is a rush of unresolved emotions, and each word exchanged seems to deepen the pain they're both feeling. Oik stands and walks to the window, looking out with a distant gaze. "I always thought we could get through anything together," she says, almost as if she's talking to herself. "But now, the reality is that we may never get back what we had." He leans closer, his heart clenching with sadness. "I wish I could go back in time and fix my mistakes," he admits. "I see now how much I hurt you, and the pain of knowing that I can't do anything to fix it is overwhelming." The silence between them is heavy, filled only by the distant sound of the city and the weight of unspoken words. The reality that they're growing apart is a constant, and the sense of loss is palpable. They're both struggling to make sense of the confusion that surrounds them. Tensions reach a peak as they are faced with the need to face the reality of their separation and their last moments together. He turns to her, his feelings mixed between the desire for reconciliation and the acceptance that it is too late. "I will never forget what we had," he promises, his eyes fixed on hers. "Even though we are going our separate ways, you will always have a special place in my memory." Oik tries to smile, but the effort only accentuates the pain she feels. "I will remember you too," she replies. "And in a way, I hope we can find some kind of peace and understanding, even if it means parting ways." They look at each other for the last time, a silent exchange of understanding and regret. The night progresses, and with it comes the acceptance that their lives are parting, leaving behind a path that was full of love and pain, but is now a closed chapter, with emotions pending and hearts heavy. The scene is one of a final goodbye. He looks at her, his heart heavy, and says, "I really hope that, somehow, we can find the peace we need." Oik, with tears in her eyes, tries to smile. "I hope that too," she replies, her voice shaking. "I want to believe that the future will bring us something better." She takes one last look at the room, taking in every detail, every memory. "Even if we can't be together, I'll carry what we've been through with me," she says, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll never forget what we had." Oik, with a wistful look in his eyes, nods. "I'll hold on to these memories," she says. "And maybe, someday, we'll look back and find some comfort in what we had." With a final squeeze of his hand, she turns and starts walking away. Each step is an echo of a shared past and an uncertain future. He watches her go, feeling the pain of separation and the hope that, despite everything, they will find peace. As Oik disappears into the distance, he is left alone, reflecting on the complexity of love and the pain of parting. Night falls, and with it comes the acceptance that their story has come to an end, but the hope of a new beginning remains. Subscribe to our channel, this is very important to us.